seems very difficult to think of two distinct objects as occupying the same space-time region. If I have a second chair, and if there's not room for it, if the only way I can fit it into the room is by having it occupy the same space-time region as the first chair, well, we have a problem, because we tend to think that it's an essential property of matter that material continuums cannot occupy or share the same space-time. You see, I cannot have two chairs sort of piled up on each other, or superimposed in a strict way. I mean, I could always pile up chairs, one on top of the other, but I cannot fuse them so that they occupy the same space-time region. If I do that, well, I have one chair. I've literally fused them together. So it seems like an essential criteria for material objects that they do not share the same space-time regions. Okay, so that's the beginning of the puzzle. Now, the puzzle of collocation emerges from this very natural intuition of the separateness or the impenetrability, l'impénétrabilité, Descartes en parle, Leibniz aussi, which seems to characterize matter as such. Impénétrabilité, ça veut dire que je ne peux pas mettre deux chaises l'une dans l'autre, littéralement, sans les avoir littéralement fondues. Auquel cas, j'ai plus qu'une chaise. Bon, ça vaut pour les cailloux, ça vaut pour les corps en général. Yes. Oui, alors overlap au sens spatio-temporel, c'est ça. Overlap, une complete overlap, ce serait en effet une indistinction spatio-temporelle des deux objets. Bon, alors l'exemple qui est donné, the example is a lump of clay. Bon, une masse argileuse, un lump of clay, un monceau d'argile. Ça c'est un objet, it's a distinct object. And you see that it's distinct from the statue that you obtain by modeling it, by sculpting it. It's a distinct object. The lump of clay is clearly distinct from the statue. They're not one numerically. They're not numerically identical. Because there's at least a bundle of properties which the statue has and the lump of clay does not have. For example, a particular shape. If my statue is in the shape of a bird, well, the lump of clay clearly does not share this property. So it cannot be one and the same object in a numerical sense. It's not the same object. Although the statue is made of the clay, the lump of clay as such is numerically different, distinct from the statue. Okay, but here is the problem. Here comes the problem. Here is the puzzle. They share the same location. So let's not speak of space-time. Let's simply speak of a spatial region. They share the same location. They occupy the same place at various times. So we have, it seems, two distinct material objects in co-location, because the lump of clay is not annihilated by the statue. It coexists with the statue. That's the point. Of course, there are distinct objects, because, well, the lump of clay has a history of its own before the statue emerges, and the statue has properties of its own that the lump of clay as clay does not share. So, but still, they share the same for a certain amount of time. They seem to be sharing the same location. So, doesn't it imply, ontologically speaking, doesn't it imply a kind of, well, an overlap? Yes, and you might say an overcrowding of space. How can two material objects share the same space during the same time? So, this seems like seems to be standing in contradiction with what Hume and you might say the natural view of material objects seems to imply. How do you resolve the contradiction, if there is one? Or you might say that's a possible answer. You might argue that there is no contradiction, of course. The easiest way to resolve a contradiction is showing there is no contradiction, of course. So how would you go about it? Using, of course, that's the point, using the endurantist toolkit or the perdurantist toolkit. The choice is yours. That's the first puzzle. Sure, but the point is the lump of clay is not, again, the cause. Yeah, of course, you could picture the lump of clay as a material cause, as Aristotle would say, cause matérielle. But the point is the cause is not abolished, is not annihilated by the coming into existence of the effect. The statue coexists with the lump of clay. The statue is made of clay, so the lump of clay is still somehow there. It's still there. When you reach the proper shape, the lump of clay does not suddenly disappear. See? It's still there. So that's the point. There's a lump of clay in the shape of a statue, of course, and then there's the statue, which is something different, because before the statue was shaped in the particular way it was shaped, it did not exist. There was another object, the lump of clay. So it seems we have one object, the lump of clay, and suddenly another object which superimposes itself upon the first, and they both cohabit, they share the same space. And this is a problem, because two material objects should not share the same or occupy the same space. So I don't agree with the way you want to resolve the contradiction. The problem is the cause coexists with its effect. How do you resolve the contradiction? Again, you can feel it. It's a problem of identity, of the way we identify the objects through time. So endurantism and perdurantism, being the claims about the way things persist through time, should help you resolve the problem. Any suggestion? You see, the thing is we have to reframe the way we punctuate the situation. The way we cut out the situation in terms of what exists at a particular time, what it means for something to persist, how we identify objects in the situation. It is the thing we have to work on. The way we cut out the situation into objects and identities through time. Yes? Okay.
And at T2, the lump of clay has a second shape, which is
Okay, let's draw. Let's make a drawing. Okay. Let's use the board for once. So you said at T1. So at T1 we have what? A lump of clay. Okay, this is a lump of clay. This is T1. Okay. And then what? At T2 we have what? Okay, let's say it's just the statue is very simple. It's a square or cubic statue. Okay, yes, that's for sure. And so you see the point. The point is here we have no statue, and here we have a statue. So in order to make it clear that here we're talking about the clay. The problem is these two entities, the lump of clay and the statue, they seem to be co-located. See? And it's clear that they're not the same object, because here we can sort of track an object and say, well, it comes into existence at this particular time, it does not exist there, and here we have another object, it seems, the lump of clay, which has continuous existence and undergoing change, of course. And at some point we have two objects sort of cohabiting. So how do you resolve the contradiction? How do you solve the puzzle?
Statue shape is a property which belongs to T2. Being
a cube? Oh no, the property does not belong to T2. Belongs to what?
To the lump of clay at T2.
Yeah? So does it belong to the statue? The statue is also a cube. The lump of clay is cubical, but the statue It's cubical. Was just, yeah. It's a cubical statue. It's the statue of a cube. Okay, but how does, okay, I agree with you. I was just adding this additional information. How does it help us to point that, well, yes, at T2 there is, the point is at T2 we have these two things coexisting.
And didn't think that the statue was a property.
Well, that's the point. The statue is an object. You can buy it, you can break it, you can destroy it by reducing it to a lump of clay, you know, by bringing it back to a shapeless form, shapeless object. So it's of course it's an object in its own right, but so is the lump of clay. That's the point. It's saying we have two parallel tracks or history lines, which at some point merge, in the sense that we have a co-location of two material objects. That's the point. The statue is not a symbolical or abstract or object. It's material. So how do you resolve the puzzle? Of course, it's a trick. I mean, it's a puzzle because there's an obvious solution. There's no real problem here. It's just a way to train your brains. Again, you see the solution involves using temporal parts. Giving you a hint. The solution involves being a perdurantist. In fact, it's a major argument for perdurance that such puzzles can be easily solved if you embrace the perdurantist perspective. That is, if you make use of temporal parts as opposed to persisting, enduring objects. So let's introduce temporal parts to describe the situation. So I agree with you. It's important to remark, to observe that, well, we should consider the situation at T2, that is a particular time. But then you should take a further step by introducing temporal parts at T2. So let's try. So
plate as it is at T1
yes.
is 1.74.
Okay.
And the statue at T2 is another component.
Of the lamp of clay? Yeah. Well, you say the statue at T2, so it's a temporal part of what? There are two objects. And nobody denies there are two objects. The question is how can they cohabit? How can they be co-located? So you say there's a temporal part of the lump of clay, and this is another temporal part of the lump of clay. This is a temporal part of the statue. In fact, it's not a temporal part of the statue because the statue does not exist yet. But this is definitely a temporal part of the statue. How does it help to re-describe the situation by using temporal parts instead of persisting objects? That's the point. So you have to go to the end of your line of reasoning. Well, that's the question. In what? What do you mean? Can you what? In what sense of adding? You mean fuse them? You mean?
Not fuse them, but there's like a movie, or
You're saying adding this and this, or adding this and this? In what sense are you thinking? The movie would be adding one temporal part and another.
Can there be temporal parts in the play and the shape?
Yeah, sure. You have infinite layers or slices in between, of course.
In between T1 and T2.
Sure. Yeah, you can, but how does it help you think about collocation? Because the problem is, of course, you have, indefinitely many slices in between. But if you take one particular moment, it seems we have two objects coexisting, which is a problem, occupying the same space. Now, yes? That's the idea. Yeah. So let me rephrase what you said. You said instead of insisting that there are two objects kind of superimposed upon each other, occupying the same space, you should stick to temporal parts and say that the only thing that you are dealing with is really two temporal parts of the respective objects, lump of clay, statue, occupying the same space. And in what sense is it less of a problem to have two temporal parts occupying the same space? Well, it's because these temporal parts do not persist. That's the point. They are not material continuums. They're not persisting material objects. They are just temporal parts. So, of course, these temporal parts are wholly located at that place, but they are momentary, they are temporary. And it's not like you have two persisting objects. And the fact that the statue and the lump of clay, or the clay, let's say, share a common temporal part is not really a problem. That's where, in fact, we should realize that this and this, as temporal parts, are the same. It's only as persisting objects, the persisting clay, the persisting statue, that these things are different. But as temporal parts, they are just the same. I mean, this is already a statue. You know, it has cubic form, it's made of clay, that's the statue. And this is already the lump of clay, because I've just drawn the shape, but it's also important that the statue is made of clay. So in fact, it's on purpose that I didn't stress the material composition of the statue, but if you think about the statue, well, it's involved in the concept of the statue that is made of clay. So what you really have in terms of temporal parts is one single object shared by two different persisting objects. It's one instantaneous object belonging to two different persisting objects. It's like you have two history lines which intersect at some point by sharing a common temporal part. But for one object, that is for the temporal part at T2, to occupy the same space is of course no problem. There's only one object there. And that's the temporal part. The only one temporal part, which is in fact shared. These are the same objects. In fact, I should draw one object, not two. No. Yes. I should only draw this at this point. And this, of course, is not a problem anymore. We have one object and not two sort of fused together. But it happens that this one object, which is instantaneous, which is a temporal stage or part, is shared, is common to two different persisting objects, namely the clay and the statue. Well, you have to say that, in fact. If you're a printer and says there's only temporal parts at every time. Sorry? Well, the persisting object is a lump of clay, which is a four-dimensional object, and a statue, which is another four-dimensional object, but they do not, as qua or as persisting object, they do not share the same space. What shares the same space is the temporal parts. And it happens that the temporal parts are the same. That's the point. The idea is that you can think of two distinct objects having common temporal parts. And this solves the puzzle, because, in fact, when you think of the spatial region occupied by the object, you have to analyze it in terms of successive temporal parts. And that's where you realize that, in fact, these two 4D objects, persisting 4D objects, only occupy the same space in the sense that their common temporal parts occupy the same space, which is only natural because they are common. There is only one temporal part each time. It happens to belong to both, but it's not more problematic. It's no more troubling than the fact that two extended things have a part in common, a spatial part in common. think, again, come back to David Lewis' example of the village and the road that runs through the village. This is the village. Well, yeah, you might say that this section of the road, which is also a section of the village, is a spatial part that is common to the village and the road. That's what we mean by saying that the road runs through the village. It's a common part, a spatial part. So this is not a problem. We can say that the village and the road are sort of co-located, partially.